Inequality and populism are two of the defining forces which investors face at the start of 2017. Oxfam, for instance, said this week that half of the world has as much money as its 8 richest members. Joining us to think about how investors should approach the idea of equality and some of these themes of populism is Markus Stadlmann of Lloyds Banking Group. Thanks for joining us, Markus. So you have, I think you've got a couple of good charts here which sort of suggest that whilst inequality is maybe one of the driving explanations for what we're seeing now, perhaps it's a force which is also changing in ways we haven't appreciated.
Yes, Dan, it is a very long-term story because actually the story starts in the 1980s with the opening up of the Chinese economy and Eastern Europe, the fall of the Iron Curtain. And in the space of 3 or 4 years, more than 1 billion workers were released to the world economy in terms of labor supply. There was a huge labor supply shock. And as a consequence, wage growth, especially for low-income jobs, but also for some middle-class jobs, stayed really low in the 1990s and after the millennium. But we are now seeing that this supply shock has actually been digested by the global economy, and we therefore see wage growth rising again in solid fashion in a number of countries, including Germany, the UK, and the United States. The other thing that's happening is that economic policies which were put in place following the financial crisis have also benefited some of the low-income jobs in advanced economies, but it took a while for this to phase in.
So what you're saying is sort of part of that inequality sort of momentum, as it were, has shifted back towards a sort of a more equal society?
For advanced economies, that is. We've actually had two diverging inequality trends over the last 2 or 3 decades. Now, if you look at the top bar here, you see that actually inequality among countries between, for example, emerging economies and advanced economies has actually been falling all through the last 3 decades. And that is not surprising because emerging economies have caught up with advanced economies, and some of them have actually joined the OECD, for example, Taiwan and Mexico, and are no longer considered an emerging economy. But at the bottom, the red bars show you the rising trend of within country inequality, and that is very, very important. That is one of the defining trends and forces which has actually ended up to support the populist trend that we've seen during the last 2 or 3 years.
And so I think you've got another chart here. So perhaps you could explain what we're looking at here in terms of this. This is the Gini index, which is a measure of inequality within societies, is it? So
exactly. So and you see weighted and unweighted, meaning that larger economies have a bigger weight according to the size of their GDP. The first consequence of inequality is actually that it sustainably reduces, as long as it is dominant, reduces consumer expenditure, right? And that obviously is bad for the global economy. You mentioned the Oxfam report earlier, and basically what this means, I mean, 8 billionaires are not going to consume as much as 3.6 billion people who don't have much, but they're consuming more because they have very basic needs, and also they're a much bigger number. I mean, there are only so many houses and cars that someone who is very wealthy can own. Therefore, inequality is really bad for the global economy, apart from ethical considerations, which are very valid. As I said already, we think that inequality has peaked during the last couple of years and has started to come down slightly, which obviously will have a beneficial effect on the global economy in a couple of years' time. It will take some time, but undoubtedly is a more positive outlook for the future.
Thank you very much, Mark.